The birth of new technology using water as fuel.
On Sunday, French Economy and Finance Minister Bruno Le Maire warned that Russia is poised to totally halt gas supplies to global markets and that people must now prepare. Let's prepare for a total cut-off of Russian gas. Today, that is the most likely option, Le Maire told an audience at an economic conference in Aix-en-Provence. We have to anticipate and to put ourselves in order of battle as of now, he emphasized.
And during the Arab embargo, when our trucks stopped along the road, it became quite serious that if we had no way of starting the trucks and start moving goods and services in and around Columbus, Ohio, then within a relatively short period of time, the masses of people in the Columbus, Ohio area and across the United States will be facing a tremendous problem, because the food supply chain in the United States is roughly around 27 days, and the food supply chain in the world is less than that. We have not reversed that dependency on foreign oil. The Department of Energy, DOE, has admitted to the American people that we are now dependent well over 63% on foreign oil. If that oil is cut off to this country in any way, shape, form, or fashion, in a relatively short period of time, this country could really be excited into war. You know, if you go hungry, then people start to try to do something about it.
Sri Lanka has sharply hiked fuel prices to a record high, causing further pain to the country's 22 million people in its worst economic crisis since independence. Sri Lanka has pretty much run out of fuel, and that's been reported widely.
I never thought that my country will end up like this. Right now there is no future. There will be a future in Sri Lanka, but it will take some time for the country to recover.
And while they harangued Pelosi with questions, it was clear they were not there to hear her answers.
No, I want to. No, you. Ask question. You've asked question. You have spoken.
Can we have a second, please?
And there was no winning them over.
We are sending a message to our parents that this fight will be won with 11 million people in the streets.
I'm undocumented, my family's undocumented, and majority of the people here are undocumented.
Exasperated, shaking, and frustrated, Pelosi finally left.
Congresswoman, your reaction?
Well, the fact is they're arguing against the DREAM Act, but they. Directing their anger at Democrats is so ridiculous.
The perennial price for living in a community with others is being neighbors, of being fellow citizens. Is that we obey the laws and customs that ensure that what the framers call domestic tranquility. I'm determined to ban these weapons again.
Any of you ever hear anything about the war brokers? If you want to study about history of World War I, World War II, you'll start to realize there were men spatially trained and women trained in order to bring countries into war, to break their economic back, to take over the controls of their countries. You ever hear of the Council of Foreign Relations, the Trilateral Commission? You ever hear about the Council of the Group of 300? You hear about the internationalists that are controlling to bring in a one world government. The attitude of the multi-internationalists is to come up with zero growth, industrial growth, zero population growth. When I was making a presentation in Geneva to 52 nations there, I was blocked in presenting this technology, not because of the viability of the technology, because the international attitude is they do not want industrial growth to be maintained. There's a move to try to force the countries to accept that they would sign over their natural resource rights. That if you sign over your natural resource rights, you have taken over the countries without even firing a shot. This is to help bring in a one world government. The number one thing that will diffuse the entire episode and be able to maintain us is to bring an alternate energy source in that we can be able to sustain and maintain not only the industrial base of this country but of the world. And therefore I will share this information with you. And once I share it with you, then you have a responsibility. I'm sharing a responsibility to you so great. Now the power structures to be, we all hear about the guys that invent the carburetors that go 200 miles per hour and what have you, and they never get out of the market area. We talk about high energy systems, development of high technology, and they never seem to get out into the marketplace. Why is that? You know, and Rockefeller was a very smart man to get our economies to operate on fossil fuel. He got a hold of a think tank. And in the think tank, he says, I want you to come up with motivating thoughts that would demotivate the people in order to bring us up on the fossil fuels. You see, at that time, we're talking about high energy research and development, are we not? And yet Rockefeller wanted to convince the population of the world that we need fossil fuel to maintain the economies, and therefore suppress and prevent alternate energy sources to come forward. And so in this think tank, he came up with such phraseologies. Well, you can always lead a horse to water, but you can't get him to drink. Any of you have ever said that? You know, if you say that out of your mouth, you know that you believe it. It's the greatest lie in the world. If you lead a horse to water and he doesn't want to drink, I'll assure you that if you stake him about 4 feet away from the water in 2 days flat, he'll try to break the rope to get to the water. If you want to speed up the process, feed him some salt. Another great demotivating thought. Well, you can't buck City Hall. How about another demotivating thought? 2 things you never discuss is politics and religion. Do you know why in the news media that you are bombarded with tremendous negativism? Because they had found out the physical, psychological makeup of an individual is such that if you receive so much negativism, you turn it off. Do you know that if our forefathers and our grandfathers were awakened out of their graves and see what's taking place in our country today, do you know what happened? They would grab their arms and go to Washington, D.C. and clean out our government. Absolutely. The negativism that's presented to you is the process of desensitizing you to allow such atrocities to take over. And if you don't think that there are people in the world that do not want America to stand, you know why? Because the Constitution in the United States, the Bill of Rights, says as free people we have ability to enjoy certain inalienable rights that was given to us by God. And unfortunately there are some people who does not want us to continue to enjoy the freedom that our forefathers fought. Because I was given a great gift. That gift was to be raised under freedom. Now let's see how we can use water as fuel, because the greatest thing that all political leaders fear, that you and I would come together in one accord. That if you and I would come together in one accord, no political system in the world, no multi-internationalist groups could defeat you.
One of the things we address with the natural water is like a sponge. It will absorb ambient air. What proves that out? Any of you gone fishing? You ever look at the gills of a fish? The gills of a fish does not change the molecular or the chemical structure of water. The only thing it does is agitates the water molecule to release dissolved air. You know, in my 9th grade science class, I asked a question that when you light a match in the air, why does not the air burn up? Because the bulk of the air is composed of non-combustible gases like nitrogen that do not support the burning process. We had found out that the water fuel cell is a multi-gas generator. It not only releases the hydrogen and oxygen gases from water uniformly based on the applied voltage potential, it also now releases the ambient air and a bulk of non-combustible gases, or gases that do not support the burning process. And as a result, we now lower the burn rate of hydrogen gas from 325 centimeters a second around to 47 centimeters a second to co-equal that of natural gas. Go ahead.
The tubular array exciters or voltage zones are immersed in natural water, forming the water fuel cell. Once energized, the gases are quickly generated on demand, releasing energy in the form of hydrogen gas that is 2.5 times more powerful than gasoline. The liberated gases are now being uniformly mixed to adjust the hydrogen gas burn rate to co-equal that of natural gas. The water acts as a gas mixing regulator since the gases are liberated by unit volume. As demonstrated, the applied voltage dictates the demand of the generator. Constant voltage allows the hydrogen gas to be generated at a constant rate, as shown. Increasing voltage simply increases gas production. Once the fuel cell meets the energy demand, switch off the voltage zones, terminating the gas process without delay. You are now witnessing, in the truest scientific terminology, the ability of burning ordinary water under control means. The temperature produced exceeds 2,500 degrees Fahrenheit. The quenching circuit prevents anti-spark back while hydrogen gas is rendered safer than natural gas. Increased voltage on demand increases flame size, increases BTU capacity. The heat energy shown is 2.5 times greater than that of gasoline and burns 3 times faster. Because of this, the gas energy can now be used to run your car on water. To retrofit the water fuel cell to a standard car engine without change, hydrogen injectors, as shown, are affixed to the air intake manifold. Exhaust
We needed a way to be able to tap into the atomic yield of hydrogen and do it very safely. So the Lord was dealing with me, and in the process, the answer was very simple, that as you ignite the hydrogen and oxygen gases, if you will now prevent the hydrogen and oxygen atom to come together to form the water molecule, it cannot stabilize, right? If the water molecule cannot form during thermal gas ignition, then what will happen? Well, thermal explosive energy has to keep continuing to occur until one of two states occur, either that a new atom structure is formed or an implosion effect occurs and mass is converted into pure energy. The equivalent energy yield from 1 gallon of water is more than 2.5 million barrels of oil per gallon of water. Go ahead. We've now taken the liberated gases. We are now starting to expose it to a high voltage field, and we are now starting to bring the combustible gas atoms into a destabilized state. Now, in our technology, when you burn hydrogen and oxygen by itself, it's releasing that energy around 2.5 times that of gasoline. But there's a tremendous amount of energy in water, and the key was, how do you tap into it? In order to do this, it became very obvious that all we had to do was expose the water molecules to opposite electrical voltage fields and shut off the flow of amps. 180 degrees out of phase, the electrolysis process. And once you shut off the flow of amps, we know in the law of physics that voltage, in fact, performs work. When you go home and you adjust the brightness control in your TV set or your computer monitor system, you're adjusting the voltage potential behind the grid of the screen, which accelerates the negative charge electrons, which strikes the fluorescent materials, which creates the greater light intensity. We know from the cyclotron, where it takes opposite electrical fields to accelerate particles around a tube or tunnel 2 or 3 miles in diameter and accelerate these particles close to the speed of light, and these particles hit a photographic plate, and that's how physicists study matter. So we know, in fact, that voltage, in fact, does perform work. But heretofore, no one ever dreamed of using voltage to pull apart the water molecule in a physical manner. So using the opposite electrical attraction force, would not now the positive charge hydrogen atom, would it not be attracted to the negative charge voltage zone? You ever hear the law of physics, opposite charges will what? And like charges will repel. Would not now the negative charge oxygen atom be attracted to the positive charge voltage zone? So therefore, we're now pulling apart the water molecule, changing the time-share rate of the molecule and simply pulling it apart in a physical manner. Go ahead.
The current global energy crisis is said to become even worse than what the world experienced in the 1970s. All across the globe, consumers are being hit by soaring prices. Businesses are facing energy supply shortages. Political leaders and central bankers are struggling with inflation, and countries are confronting worsening supply chain problems. In addition to pushing consumer prices to soar, the ongoing crisis is transforming a previously global market into one that's fragmented and extremely vulnerable to disruption. It's not only hampering economic growth, but also deepening the world's great power rivalries. And now, populations around the planet are being warned to prepare for fuel and power shortages, rationing, and rolling outages as energy reserves hit dangerously low levels. on top of everything else due to the geopolitical crisis arising from the conflict in Ukraine. A total cutoff of Russian gas is about to trigger catastrophic consequences for the global market, according to President Vladimir Putin.
And that's why you receive the negativism. That's why in these conferences that they will try to promote and try to tell you that you have not the power or say-so in our government. And I want to tell you that under the Constitution of the United States, read it, for it gives us the ultimate power to be able to determine the destiny and the strength of our country. And how I'm bringing this technology in, it can't come through the multi-international structures. If I would sign over this technology to General Electric or Westinghouse, then we'd be taken over within 24 hours. If you think you got political pressures in the United States government, try to negotiate with the military. For their political pressures are great, and they cry out. He said, because the apathy of the American people is such that they will not come behind you. And for a long time, that statement stood out. But I will assure you, today, not only in the United States, but in the world, that they're coming together in one accord and say it's enough. We are on a planet, which is our spaceship, and if we do not reverse, if we do not come together in one accord, then I would say, gentlemen, that we will not survive. Now, when we show this technology, you must now make the decision whether or not you come together in one accord and try, and we can do it, to come together to keep this country strong, as well as to protect it. And when President Reagan was advised of this technology, he turned against the multi-internationalists and said, do not block. And he wrote the executive action to ensure that this technology would not only be protected for the United States, but also to be protected for the world. And it's amazing to me that we have the abilities that we can proceed on. Go ahead. The first thing, and always been the first objective, and always will be the first objective in developing the technology, you must legalize it first, and then bring it in. Many inventors blow their ego, they get to their Achilles heel to try to obtain the information, not for the benefit of you and I, but it's the benefit of control or manipulation or suppression of that technology. So when you develop your high technology, you do everything possible. The prime objective is to legalize the technology. When you receive that gold seal and that little red ribbon, it says that you have complied with the laws of the land. Is it not so? It's not what Stan Meyer says. It's what is now been legalized. And if there's any question of operability of the technology, under the law, what do they have? They'll pull you under U.S. Code 35 U.S. Code 101 and show operability. And when we showed operability of this technology, then it became a great concern to protect this technology for all the countries as well as the United States. So as I move, there are many people who have seeked to try to cause me to stumble, have tried to seek to suppress me, has tried to seek in many ways, but the Lord has always allowed that we can proceed on with the technology. As we're legalizing the technology, I'm subject to the national security laws of this country. I'm also subject to the national security laws of other countries under the PCT Treaty Act. Other countries who now are informed of this type of technology is requesting that this technology would also be protected for their countries. For you see, if this type of technology is restricted from those other countries, then their entire economic base could collapse. You know, if you can use water as a fuel source to maintain the industrial base of one country, but if it's blocked in another, you can drop the prices on your goods and commodities, and therefore the other country cannot be able to sustain itself. Unfortunately, there are those who seek the power controlled by greed, right? And seems to have the desire to control man under greed. It's a form of this sickness. And unfortunately, in my many battles, we've had to overcome this type in order to bring this technology out. So you'll have to forgive me for those who feel that should have brought the technology out further. I had to be in compliance with both U.S. and the national security laws and the PCT Treaty Act in order to get around the loopholes that are set there not for you and I, but set there to control and manipulate the high technology. And so, if you never violate that prime directive, you can bring it in. Go ahead. Water is fuel. You know, how many of you here today have driven a car here? Any of you driven cars at all? Do you realize that when you're driving on gasoline, do you know that you're running on a hydrogen? You know that if you look at the chemical equation of gasoline, you will find out the hydrogen atom is attached to the carbon atom. Is not so? And basically, in the highest octane of gasoline, you have roughly about a half a pound of hydrogen to it. Now, water, on the other hand, is 2 to 1. 2 hydrogen atoms and 1 oxygen atom. Is it not so? How many pounds of hydrogen do we have in water? You find out by the atomic weight is around 1.7 pounds of hydrogen in water. I had the most scientific compilation study on hydrogen that's ever come out of the scientific world from NASA. Did we not propel the Columbia spaceship by hydrogen and oxygen? And in that report, it clearly stipulated that hydrogen was the most ideal fuel of the future. It can be utilized anywhere, solve even the environmental pollution problem, but they did not have an answer in 3 areas. 1, to produce the hydrogen gas or release it economically from water, control the rate of production, be able to adjust the burn rate of hydrogen gas to co-equal to fossil fuels, and add the 4th one, be able to transport it without spark ignition. And I wrote all the patent rights both nationally and internationally on this type of technology, to be able to use water as a fuel source.
We have to be prepared for the situation to become critical. Executives estimate that the Ukraine crisis will push up energy prices for consumers by between 71% and 200% this year. At this point, populations all around the world are being warned to brace for sweeping energy supply shortages, rationing of fuels, and rolling outages. A potential domino effect from a Russian supply cutoff means that the entire planet could face repercussions as the global market loses one of its major suppliers, Lemaire explained. For Americans, tighter energy supplies mean that they will spend 70% on energy this year. According to the calculations of Tim Morstad, the Associate State Director for AARP, there's going to be some real sticker shock here. He reveals today's average prices are already about 70% higher than a year ago. If demand continues to outstrip supplies, that could amount to a 140% increase in less than 24 months. Many have seen their wages going up by 5.9% in December. But that's no match for a 70% increase in energy prices, Morstad said. These are essential expenses. Unfortunately, even the head of the International Energy Agency is saying that the ongoing supply squeeze that's triggering crippling energy shortages and sending prices to all-time highs is getting worse. The world has never witnessed such a major energy crisis in terms of its depth and its complexity, IEA Executive Director Fatih Birol said at a global energy forum last Thursday. We might not have seen the worst of it yet. This is affecting the entire world. We're entering very chaotic times, and our social stability is at risk. An apocalyptic energy supply chain breakdown is ahead, and as geopolitical tensions continue to escalate, the second half of this year will see waves of social unrest emerging all around the globe as populations rise against inflation, food and energy shortages, and the rampant cost of living.
Is that we obey the laws and customs that ensure that what the framers call domestic tranquility.
We are sending a message to our parents that this fight will be won with 11 million people in the streets.
I'm undocumented, my family's undocumented, and majority of the people here are undocumented.
The perennial price for living in a community with others is being neighbors, of being fellow citizens.
Exasperated, shaking, and frustrated, Pelosi finally left. Congresswoman, your reaction?
Well, the fact is they're arguing against the DREAM Act, but they.
So there's been a nuclear attack.
One of the greatest misconceptions about nuclear bombs is that they instantly annihilate everything in sight. But the fallout from a nuclear blast actually has layers. When it explodes, it leaves in its wake a kind of destruction that's both fast and slow, and one whose devastation stretches much farther and lingers far longer than many might suspect. For the sake of example, imagine a 10-kiloton nuclear bomb goes off in Times Square. The moment it detonates, a white flash is visible for miles. The light is so bright that, for a moment, people as far away as Queens and Newark can't see. At the same time, scorching heat radiates outward from the explosion site, followed by a massive fireball. The core of the fireball is tens of millions of degrees, as hot as the center of the sun. There are few survivors within a half-mile radius of the blast. Buildings and vegetation in that same range ignite or char. The bomb disrupts gas lines, burns structures and power lines, and knocks out communication towers and cell phones within about 1.6 miles.
Flying glass and debris are immediate dangers, so stay where you are until you're sure it's safe to move.
A colossal wave of pressure follows the fireball, traveling at the speed of sound and producing winds as fast as 500 miles per hour. All told, the explosion creates a crater 50 feet deep and a shockwave of about 3.2 miles, reaching south to Gramercy Park, north to the Met, and east and west into the Hudson. Residual pressure shatters windows, and piles of rubble as tall as 30 feet tower within a half-mile radius of Times Square. This has all happened in a matter of seconds. Meanwhile, in the days and hours after the initial explosion, a plume of fallout travels in a single direction away from the blast site. The plume could, for example, settle up the eastern seaboard, leaving radioactive dust on everything in its path. The most radioactive region of the plume could reach about 20 miles to New Rochelle. A much larger but less radioactive region of the plume, known as the hot zone, could extend about 60 miles north to Monroe, Connecticut.
Now large amounts of pulverized debris and molten earth are pulled up into the mushroom cloud. The radioactive atoms produced in the explosion join with the particles of earth and debris. The mushroom-shaped cloud forms and climbs higher.
The first pulse of radiation wreaks biological warfare at the molecular level of everyone outside or in weakly insulated buildings, altering the structure of key cellular machinery and injuring DNA, so that within minutes, people begin to feel nauseous and dizzy and begin to experience headaches and vomiting. Then, anywhere from several days and 2 weeks, symptoms of those exposed to radiation worsen. In severe cases, infected people will become delirious, emaciated, and incapacitated. In most cases, people with radiation sickness die in one of two ways. Their immune system is no longer able to fight infection, or their digestive system becomes too damaged to function. Those who survive do so by seeking shelter, ideally in a strong underground structure like a basement, a tunnel, or a parking garage. Fallout from a nuclear blast is extremely dangerous at first, but the danger decreases rapidly. Within 24 to 72 hours of the explosion, it's safe for survivors to reemerge. Theoretically, a bomb of this size would kill about 250,000 people and injure roughly 300,000 more. That's 20 times more deadly than any act of terrorism or natural disaster in all of America's history. And if in this hypothetical scenario, the bomb had been dropped from the sky instead of detonated on the ground, the number of fatalities would have soared. For context, consider this. This hypothetical scenario is a small-scale example. A larger nuke, like the 300-kiloton warheads that countries like, say, China or Russia possess, would kill at least 1.2 million and injure an additional 2 million more.
All these factors must be considered as we plan for the survival of our homes, our families, and our nation in the nuclear age.
Don't ask me how or why, just know that the big one has hit, okay? So what do? There are 3 important steps that I want you to remember. Step 1, get inside fast. Step 2, stay inside. Step 3, stay tuned. Follow media for more information. All right, you've got this.
Now, we've been doing and developing this technology in a way as a retrofit energy system. In other words, what good is it to put it in the home heating if you have no fuel source to be able to run the trucks and operate the automobiles? What good is it if you don't have an energy source that you cannot put into industry and maintain the industrial base? What good is it, for example, if you cannot be able to maintain aviation? You know, during the Arab embargo, we also was confronted with another problem. The problem being is that at that particular time, the United States government had only 2.5 days of aviation fuel for global defense. Today it's down to a day and a quarter. When it reaches a day supply, the Joint Chiefs of Staff will have to make the decision, no more global defense.
If that would actually happen, then we would be faced within 180 to 240 days of about 1.5 billion people facing starvation. For you see, the entire industrial revolution of the United States and the industrial base of the United States and world is based on what? The supply and the utilization of energy. Now, back in 1965, I was in Washington, D.C. when the scientists were called in to come up with a fail-safe nuclear power system. And in 3 days in that meeting, I got up in the meeting, and unfortunately, I wasn't with the Lord at that time, and I said, gentlemen, everything you have said to me in this meeting is a bunch of BS. There's no substance on the face of the earth subject to uranium-238s or 235s, but you're going to have the hourglass effect occur within less than roughly a 15-year period of time. Unfortunately, 3 Mile Island came forth on the prophecy. We talk about Chernobyl, and in the Bible, in the book of Revelation, it talks about the wormwood. In the end time, wormwood would make the waters bitter, and many would die. The Russian word Chernobyl means wormwood. It's a little bitterroot plant that grows over in a certain valley in Russia where the Chernobyl plant is located. They talk about the radiation going out in the atmosphere and going over into northern part of Sweden and Norway where they had to kill all the reindeer and all their animals. But they don't talk about the meltdown going down in the water table and it's contaminating the water tables. And those contaminated water and radiation is now dumping into the Black Sea and into the Mediterranean. And all those millions of Europeans are using those waterways to wash their clothes and to wash their crops and so forth are going to be dying of cancer of high exposure to radiation. And it's said that millions will die as a result of wormwood. And the Lord said that this knowledge pertaining to water when he was talking to Job and he asked Job the question. He said, Job, have you ever considered the treasures of snow? Or have you ever considered the treasures of hell, which I have reserved against the time of trouble, against battle and war? And the reason why I'm here today is that the multi-international corporate structure can't bring in this type of technology. The federal governments cannot bring in this technology. It has to come through an individual such as myself, and it has to move through you and I. So as I impart this technology onto you, then you have a responsibilities to it. This technology must get in through the people, or otherwise it will not go forward. Go ahead. But you know, the reason why I'm here today is that we can invent and develop, as the Lord has shown me, to take this technology and to use water as a fuel, to get it out to stabilize our economy. You see, we're all in the same boat, and if we don't do this, we're not going to eat it. We're not going to tell about it. Even in trying to cancel, many people talk about all the problems that we have, and very few give the answers. But now I impart that the same responsibility the Lord has given unto me. He says, greatly I have given unto you, and greatly I expect in return. So now I've imparted this responsibilities to you. The only way that we're going to bring it in, and history has shown time and time again, it's only going to come in through you and I. So I impart this responsibilities to you. We can invent and develop the technology. We can go through and fight all of our battles and our warfare and to win. But in the final analysis, it's going to come up to you. And you're going to have to make the decision whether or not you want this type of technology to come in and perhaps solve the environmental pollution problems, perhaps keep food on the table and keep industry alive, and to be able to help clean up the environment so that we can stay on this little planet, which we call the spaceship. Thank you, and have a nice day.
Thank you.
I'm Daniel, and this is my family team from Secure Supplies. We have preserved and rebuilt green technologies actively around the world now for over 18 years. The water fueling and gas phase change technologies are changing the way your world's power and gas industries work. Helping you access these technologies is our life mission. Click the subscribe button now to join our technology releases and updates every Monday. And consider buying a ticket to the show by pressing the link in the description. If you would like to see the secrets ahead of time, head over to our Patreon tech training releases every Friday. Merch updates are ready. If you want to look good in the H2 hot rodding scene, and if you would like to pick up some hydrogen hot rodding merch, now is your chance. Please head over to our hydrogen hot rod shop. The link is in the description. Thanks. Alternatively, you can send me an email or join me on WhatsApp chat. The details are in the description. Let me know which things you like and what sizes you want. Network of home builders is growing very fast. Whether it's a roadster, supercar, or a yacht build, or maybe even an industrial power gas energy project. I'm here to assist and guide you. Please head over to the Consult with Dan link in the description, book a discussion for 10 to 30 minutes, and I will save you decades